Hello, and welcome to Mailin It, the official podcast of the United States Postal Service. I'm Carla Kirby.
And I'm Jonathan Castillo. On average, every day, the Postal Service processes 421.4 million pieces of mail. Getting all that mail to 167 million addresses across the nation requires a lot of driving. So it's no surprise the Postal Service manages one of the world's largest vehicle fleets. But it's also an aging fleet. Many of those iconic white trucks we're used to seeing in our neighborhoods date back to the late 1980s.
In today's episode, we're going to talk about a major project underway to modernize the Postal Service's delivery fleet. It's the biggest deployment of new vehicles in Postal's history. And here to take us through it is Justin Glass, our Director of Fleet Management. Justin, welcome to Mailin It.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Justin, I can only imagine what it must be like to manage and maintain more than 256,000 vehicles, especially with many of them having been on the road for more than a couple decades. Can you give us some highlights of the plan to modernize our fleet?
Yes, I can. And again, this is a great endeavor that we are embarking upon. We're going to really stick on our modernization effort here to our delivery fleet. That is where we're focusing our modernization efforts. And what we have planned over the next 5 years, we are going to procure and deploy over 106,000 new delivery vehicles. Within that, 66,000 of those will be battery electric. All of them, though, including the 40,000 that'll be internal combustion engine, they're all going to include the latest safety features. Things like backup cameras, driver assist features, looking at lane departure or incoming traffic alerts and things like that, blind spot monitoring, collision sensors, automatic rear and front braking, all in an effort to keep our employees safe while modernizing the environment that they are in. In that, we've got 4 main types of vehicles that we are making up of this 106,000 right now. That's the Mercedes Metris and the Ram ProMaster. Both of those have been on the road for a little while. The Mercedes Metris is a right-hand drive vehicle, which enables our carriers to make delivery out of the right-hand side. The Ram ProMaster is a larger vehicle, more built for park and loop routes or dismount routes, things where they can get out and make deliveries within a neighborhood and get back in, as well as helping us give more cargo capacity for our package volume. We'll also have Ford E-Transit electric vehicles. These are very similar to the Ram ProMaster that we've seen around there, but of course these are electric. And then we are going to, of course, have our next generation delivery vehicles that'll make up a large portion of this 106,000. Those are actually going to be in service for over 20 years. Those are our purpose-built vehicles that are designed for long life, while the others are more commercial off the shelf and will have a shorter shelf life for us.
I know that many postal delivery vehicles have very specific requirements, and the driver being on the right side for one. But what's the reason for choosing 4 different types of vehicles?
That is a very good question, and it could probably take us about 5 hours to answer that, but we'll keep it pretty brief here, right? It really comes down to the needs of the Postal Service and its delivery operations. The vast majority of our postal routes require delivery from the right-hand side of the vehicle. The mailboxes are on the right-hand side of the road, facing the road, so the carriers can make efficient delivery, ergonomic delivery, and make sure that we're keeping very productive and not wasting a lot of time having the carrier have to get up and get out and go walk to a mailbox and come sit back down. That's a lot of unnecessary movement that we could eliminate by having a right-hand drive vehicle. So needing those requirements of the delivery network of our operations that really drive what we need to get. Inside of that, you start considering what you have out there. In the United States market, there's not a lot of right-hand drive vehicles. In fact, if you asked anybody out there, tell me a company that makes right-hand drive vehicles, the answer is pretty much going to be nobody. We can't find any. There's very limited options out there. And so within that, you try to look to, we have an urgent need. We have a fleet that is aging. We talked about, one of the world's largest civilian fleets out there. That fleet is aging, and we have urgency to replace the vehicles, combined with a specific requirement set that's driving our needs. So that gives us very limited targeted vehicle types that we can go after. But we want to hit that urgency. We can't wait 20, 30 years to get all these vehicles in. We need to make movements now. So we find where we can hit what's available in the market and apply that to our postal operations.
What's the difference between, I think you mentioned these purpose-built vehicles as opposed to, off the shelf?
So purpose-built vehicles are vehicles that are designed for a specific use case. For us, for example, the Postal Service, again, we need right-hand drive delivery. We need something that's going to be around for a long time. It's going to be durable. It's built to last. It's built to handle multiple terrains. It's built to operate in various temperatures because in the United States Postal Service, as you all are aware, we don't get to say where we're going to deliver and where we're not going to deliver. We are going to deliver to those 167 million addresses 6 and 7 days a week. And so we got to have a vehicle that can do that. And with that amount of investment and you're spinning up a new manufacturer, you need somebody that's going to be, have a vehicle that's going to be around for a while. And so the commercial market, you go out to buy something from a dealer's lot out there today, that stuff's not designed to last 20 plus years every single day and the heavy amount of use, 300, 400, 500 stops a day like ours are. You need something that can handle the rigor. And so that's where the purpose-built comes from, and why we pursued a purpose-built program. The commercial off-the-shelf world, COTS, commercial off-the-shelf, is what you could go get right now from, let's say, Ford or GM, Ram, Chrysler, Mercedes. We're using many of those there. There is a use case for the commercial off the shelf, specifically really to help us get to as a bridge to where we need to be. We know we can have many routes that can take left-hand drive. Maybe they last 8 to 10 years, not the 20, but they can give us a gap till we can get that right-hand drive vehicle in the right spot. They can give us that bridging of the gap to get to where we need to be and satisfy that urgent need that we have right now because those vehicles are aging.
Justin, you mentioned that ordering the purpose-built vehicles takes a lot of time. So what went into getting these built and designing the specs?
Yeah, and it is definitely a journey, and it has been a journey through many years for the Postal Service to get to this point. You start with defining what those requirements are. And the Postal Service's Vehicle Center of Excellence led that effort and worked with our carriers, worked with headquarters delivery operations, worked with safety, ergonomics, worked with the unions. We worked with a lot of different stakeholders to determine what are those unique requirements? What are the things that we need that vehicle to build? So the first bit of building this purpose-built program is understanding what those requirements are so that a supplier or multiple suppliers could then build to that. And so that's what that next step. Once you settle on those requirements, you put out that statement of work for design prototype vehicles, and multiple people then came in and said, hey, I'm a supplier. I think I have a way to meet your requirements. So we had several different suppliers provide prototypes, and then the Postal Service's team took that and evaluated each one of those prototypes. And that evaluation process goes through different rigors to make sure we're identifying the right supplier that can meet our demands, meet the requirements as we stated there, and the ones that the team ultimately prefers. And so you go through that, and you go through the various stages then of procurement in terms of then getting the formal designs out there. You kind of knock out the folks that could not meet on the original prototypes, and then you evaluate the ones that did make it through for overall quality and performance and value for the Postal Service. When value is going to include cost. And so as you go through all that, then you make sure that you get your right decision. And that took multiple years for us to go through to make sure we found the right supplier. But then once you identify that supplier, purpose-built programs, it would be ideal if somebody had a vacant warehouse all ready to go, and then you could put them right on there. But nobody builds that far in advance to say, I'm going to get this. You can't invest millions of dollars, some maybe hundreds of millions of dollars to get facilities ready until you know. So once that supplier was chosen, then they were then had to spin up their factory. They found their location. They put in all of their automated equipment. They're getting all that going. And that award was made in February of 2021. And they started producing vehicles with our first deliveries in June of 2024. So you could see how long that took. And that was them getting facilities ready for an automated line so that they can be popping out 20,000 vehicles a year.
While we're on the subject of NGDVs, let's talk about their unique look. Since we obviously can't show our audience what these vehicles look like, can you tell us a little bit about the design decisions that were made for that vehicle?
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen the images out there, and hopefully you have, because they've been well publicized and they get a little bit of ridicule, right? But the really cool thing about this is the NGDV was designed with a specific purpose in mind, and that's postal delivery. And it may look a little interesting, and some people find it comical. Some people say it looks like a duck or a platypus or something like that. It has that because it was designed specifically with the Postal Service's operations in mind to be able to accommodate our workforce. So it's designed for the 95th percentile male as well as the 5th percentile female to be able to have much wider visibility than what we have today, to be able to see all points of the road just a couple feet in front of them. That's why we have a huge windshield designed the way it is to accommodate that span of heights, because our employees span all various sizes. And it accommodates that. Then also, a 95th percentile male can stand up without their head hitting the roof. And you still need that 5th percentile female to be able to sit in that seat comfortably and ergonomically and have the visibility through the windshield to see just 3 feet in front of them. So it was designed with safety in mind. And then when you pull all that together, it gives it a little unique design. And honestly, though, as unique as it is, and sometimes as what you get some of the humorous statements out there, this design truly grows on you. And, if you've seen it as much as I have, it starts to be like, look, that's actually a normal looking car. And when you consider form, they really function over form. And in a lot of cases, when we go out and buy a car, sometimes we're buying form over function. In this instance, it is function over form, and it's going to do its job tremendously.
That's really good to hear. One of the things I wanted to ask is one of the knocks on the LLV, if you will. There's not a lot of space in the back for packages, right? So are the NGDVs bigger than the LLVs?
The NGDVs are significantly bigger. We have more than doubled the cargo capacity in the back. And again, if you've ever been in an LLV and tried to grab mail out of that LLV and you have any kind of height, you know how much you have to lean over, and it's not a comfortable working environment. Again, this is designed for the 95th percentile male to be able to walk through that vehicle without having to duck. Their heads are not going to hit the top of the NGDV. Now, our very tallest people may have to duck a little bit, but nowhere near what you had to duck with an LLV. If you just look at the height difference overall, the NGDV is 111 inches tall. The LLV is 85 inches tall.
Wow. I'm sure a carrier is going to love that.
Yes.
I understand that the Postal Service asked several mail carriers for, their input on these NGDVs, on the final design of them. I'm curious, what are the sorts of things that, these mail carriers were asking for?
So, as we went through this whole process with the prototypes, I mentioned having the carriers and the unions involved in that as part of the stakeholders. But also once we got centered down to or selected down to Oshkosh in this NGDV, we had their design, and we wanted to bring the carriers in to do what we call final design review. Looking at what we have, how do we put this into the exact settings, the exact setup that will help them be more productive and more comfortable. They're the ones that are going to be living this every day for the next 20 plus years, right? And so we brought in over 30 carriers. They then evaluated what Oshkosh's prototype was and kind of said, hey, here's some changes we'd like to make. And those are things like, hey, there's a gap over here. I might drop letters. And we don't need to have a spot where this letters could be lost if I drop it in this gap. Let's put a box. Let's seal this off. things like that. Or I need a coat hook moved because where you have it currently set, that could end up impeding my ability to be productive. Can we move coat hooks around on this side? Can we move the door from sliding open from left to right to left? Could we make the mail tray more in a more reachable location? And, hey, the steps as we go through and getting in and out, I need the steps to be a little bit more, maybe some of them may be too severe. Some of them maybe could give me a little bit more gap. And so we kind of work through to make sure we honed in the specific designs to get to that final product that the carriers are going to love and enjoy for the next 20 plus years.
Justin, you mentioned that, these new NGDVs, we plan on having them for about 20 years in service, right? And as we're leading up to the production of them, there was a lot of testing that was going through. What types of, tests, what types of rigors did we go through to kind of test these out to make sure that they're going to be able to last, 20 years into the future?
No, thank you for that question. And yeah, it's very important to us that we know we're purchasing a quality product. And, the last thing we want to do is get something out there that's not going to work and not going to give us that, we paid for a 20-year performance and not give us that. So we worked with the supplier to go through various levels of testing across multiple components. We'll start with, can the doors open and close for 20 plus years? Can the windows roll up and down for 20 plus years? So we did cycle testing on all of this stuff, and where the supplier did, and they provide us as evidence of that. And our Vehicle Center of Excellence, who is in charge of the quality of this build, we're sending engineers out to monitor the testing of all this stuff. And so you test the doors opening and closing, hundreds of thousands of cycles of windows rolling up and down. Thousands of cycles of keys being pressed and different things like that to make sure that the initial quality there is going to hold up to the rigors of the Postal Service's daily demand. And let's be honest, we wear vehicles out because you're talking 400, 500 stops a day, in and out, door opening and closing all day long. Again, that's why you need that purpose-built rigor behind it, and we did test for that. But in terms of vehicle performance overall, we did both cold weather and hot weather testing. We tested this at high altitudes. So cold weather, it's taking us up to northern Minnesota and running this through slush, through ice, through all the stuff that you can, check in. Can it stop when it gets all, the ice built up on the tires and all this stuff and everything around all the slush? So you did a lot of the slush testing and everything like that. Multiple years. Again, we talked about since we signed in 2021 to getting vehicles out in 2024, we were out there multiple times in northern Minnesota. We were putting these through, the paces in Death Valley, to get hot temperature, taking it up into the mountains of Colorado to get altitude testing and things like that. So testing it in every environment, because at the end of the day, the Postal Service, we're going to operate in every environment. And then there are mandated safety tests that are regulated by National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration, things like that. Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards test. You got to do crash testing. You got to do EPA testing, and the NGDV has passed all of those easily. It's done very well. It's actually outperformed what they believe they would do in some of those cases, which is great. Emissions testing is gone really well for the ICE. Of course, with the BEV, there's no emissions, but brake testing, all this stuff. That's part of what you do in those couple years while you're building a factory too. Is you get prototypes, you get what we call design cognizant vehicles or test proving vehicles, and you go and you prove that the vehicle can do what it needs to do.
It sounds like you are very proud of this project, and it's going to be something that really it makes the Postal Service proud. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, the NGDV program we're very proud of. Right, it is a unique vehicle for the Postal Service's needs that is going to provide a very comfortable working environment for our carriers for the next 20 years. Let's face it. I mean, those vehicles are their offices. And they're spending 8 to 10 to 12 hours some days, maybe longer in peak. Right, they're spending a lot of time in there, and we need to provide something that they can be proud of as well. And we believe we have. This is, again, we've involved them in this entire program, union involvement from the National Association of Letter Carriers, the National Rural Letter Carriers Association, and we've had the APWU there as well because they maintain these vehicles. And using that experience, I think we've provided, or Oshkosh has provided us a product, we're purchasing a product that they all can be proud of, that they've all had a stake in, and that is going to provide, again, comfort and ergonomics and modern safety equipment that's going to keep our folks working comfortably and safe for the next 20 plus years. So we're very proud of that. We have a truly great product here to provide to our customers there, which are our carriers.
So it's no coincidence that the fleet modernization is coming just a few years into the Postmaster General's Delivering for America plan. What role did the DFA play in getting the fleet upgrade to the point that it's at today?
Well, it drove everything. Right. We base all of our decisions about how it best aligns with the Delivering for America plan as we seek to transform how we serve our customers out there. And fleet modernization was a core tenet that was included in the Delivering for America plan. In fact, it's a key part, a section of the chapter around improving delivery operations. And so it is definitely a key part of that. It's one of the largest investments that's being made in Delivering for America plan. And vehicles are a necessary expense, a necessary cost to be able to conduct business. And you want to minimize that necessary cost to the extent that you can. And we have some savings opportunities by replacing vehicles that are 30 plus years old with newer vehicles. And that way we can focus the rest of our expenses that we save onto the core business of Delivering for America.
You mentioned that the modernization effort will actually take costs out of the system, right? How does that work?
So, the big thing, and we've talked about it at the beginning, and just kind of reiterate, the majority of our fleet is based on right now the long life vehicle. The long life vehicle, LLV, as it's commonly called, was built on a 1987 Chevy S10 chassis. That vehicle, 1987, and this is 2024, that's 37 years old, right? As vehicles age, if you own a vehicle, you certainly are aware of this. As vehicles age, they start to cost more and more money as you go forward. Postal Service is not exempt from that. These vehicles are approaching 40 years old. They're going to cost more. Things are going to break down a little bit more often. Now, as you get to a 30-plus-year-old vehicle, where you start running into issues is parts availability. Who makes parts for a 1987 Chevy S10 anymore? Where do you find them? But we do have some suppliers that can give us things. But as we become more and more the only buyer of those parts, they're going to start to increase in cost. So these costs continue to increase every year. It's not just theory. It's happening every single year. We watch it in the numbers, and we see where we have that. So if we can inflect that and bring the cost to maintain those vehicles down, that can justify the purchase of a capital at the very beginning. So it will help us save expenses in the long run while maintaining this necessary thing that we have. Again, vehicles, it's a necessary investment. It's one that you need to sustain operations. It's not like we're buying them to generate a whole lot of savings out there, but we've got to be able to maintain our operations, sustain those operations in a cost-effective way. And that's what fleet modernization will help us do. It'll take a lot of expenses out of the organization.
It seems the new vehicles will also support the Postal Service's overall transformation because they're designed with today's mail composition in mind. For example, package volume has increased over the past few decades, which means our delivery vehicles need to reflect that. You mentioned that the new next-gen vehicle is going to include more parcel space, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. You're absolutely spot on that the delivery market has changed dramatically from the 80s and 90s to today, right? The world has changed dramatically from the 80s and 90s to today. And certainly that mail mix was not, excluded from that change. And that's what's driving a lot of our change overall in the organization. Vehicles are not exempt from that. And that is one of the great things about our vehicle modernization efforts is each of these vehicles bringing in have more cargo capacity than the LLV. Most of them have significantly more. And that's going to provide us that ability to better serve a growing package demand while also being able to meet our core mail delivery requirements on a daily basis.
I think it's interesting for the first time in our history, really, the Postal Service's fleet will include a significant number of electric vehicles. What you mentioned, 66,000 EVs, right? So that's about 62% of the entire fleet. So what was behind that decision to make more than half of the new fleet battery electric?
Well, it comes down to meeting opportunity within our requirements, right? And we talked about that earlier, how the purpose-built platform, everything like that, it's all about meeting what the Postal Service's operational requirements are. And in this instance, there was an opportunity that the Postal Service had to meet its operational requirements with something that could also be more sustaining for the environment. And not everywhere do we have that opportunity. We can't go 100% electric today. It would not work feasibly for our operations. But the Postal Service took a look at this and said, where we have the opportunity to apply this sustainable solution to our operational requirements, we will. And so it's really the merging of our requirements with what opportunity we have out there. The other part that helped play into that and help provide some of that opportunity was the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, which provided $3 billion worth of funding from Congress and the administration to the Postal Service to help it pursue battery electric vehicles and for the infrastructure and for the vehicle purchases itself.
So I can only imagine that deploying a fleet of EVs has its challenges. So for example, how are you planning to charge all of these vehicles?
It certainly is our challenge at the moment. And it's something that the organization has been very purposeful about how we solve this challenge. And one of the things the Postal Service has been very adamant on is we need to pursue, at least early on here, but potentially for long term, a policy and a strategy that has one charger per vehicle. And the reason why, again, is at the end of the day, we're responsible for delivering to 167 million addresses 6 and 7 days a week. And you have to have that fuel. And then our fuel in this case is electricity. And so we need each vehicle to be ready to go at the start of the day and not have to worry about balancing charger usage throughout a day, because our delivery is not optional, right? It's one that we've got to hit 167 million addresses 6 and sometimes 7 days a week. And that is our challenge, is how do we then apply a charger for every vehicle? We can't just do one charger for an office of 100 routes and say everybody share that, right? You've got to have a significant number of chargers for these routes. And so we looked across the organization and you try to identify, how do I install 66,000 chargers out there to hit 66,000 vehicles? When you try to identify what facilities actually have that infrastructure that can handle it. The ones that are the most likely candidates to have electric power infrastructure to support a large number of chargers are our new sorting and delivery centers. And this is a great hybrid meshing of delivering for America's various facets, from how we want to redesign the network to also then how we modernize the vehicles. And they really merge together and they really complement each other very well here. Those facilities are the most likely to have ample power available to put several chargers out there. And so we're starting at our sorting delivery centers. And then our next phase from that will be our modernized plants, the LPCs that will have SNDCs within them, because those will also most likely candidates to have enough power. And then we'll look at our larger delivery units and kind of go from there. Again, large delivery units that may have an Estes or an ATIS out there may have the most likely candidates next to have the power. And so we'll work down as those candidate sites that have more than likely enough power to be able to handle a large number of chargers.
So for a long time, our fleet modernization plans were something we talked about in the future tense, something, that was coming down the pipe. Now it sounds like the future is absolutely here. As part of the DFA, we have rolled out our vehicle modernization. So what, in closing, would you like to share with our listeners about fleet modernization as a whole, or things that they should look for in their neighborhood?
Ooh, there you go. This is the exciting part, and this is what makes us so happy to be doing this and really charges us up. getting these new vehicles out there is such a big deal. 106,000 vehicles. They're not all coming at once. Again, we talked about it's going to take, through 2028 to get these 106,000 vehicles. But it's happening right now, to your point, Carla. It is happening right now. We talked about earlier, 20,000 vehicles have been deployed this year. You're seeing them in neighborhoods across the nation, right? We're not just going and hitting one sector at a time, one part of the country, starting in the Northeast, go all the way down. We're hitting into these various different environments right now. The NGDVs, they started rolling into the Postal Service in June. We've got a handful of those vehicles now. And again, we've purchased 50,000. We'll see those coming in over the next several years. And as these things come out, you're going to see more and more electric vehicles, right? As of today, we have about 165 electric vehicles operating on routes every single day across 13 SNDCs. That is really cool. Now, you take me a month ago and I was significantly less. This is ramping up very quickly. It's rolling, and it is not a thing that is far into the future. It is happening right now. It's funny. I told my team, when we hit the calendar year of 2024, we knew this is when NGDVs were coming. We knew this is when we would deploy our first electric vehicles. I said, look, the future is no longer coming. The future is now. And for fleet modernization for the Postal Service, modernization is now, and it's happening, and it's really exciting time to be part of all of this, because what better way can we serve our carriers who are serving our customers than giving them something that's safe, comfortable, has air conditioning for the summer, has heat for the winter, is going to give them something that's going to change their lives positively for the next 20 plus years.
Well, I'll tell you this. I, for one, cannot wait to see my letter carrier coming down the street in one of these new NGDVs. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure speaking with you. And wow, like you said, what an exciting time for the Postal Service.
Yeah, thank you again. And thank you for letting us share our story. And it's a privilege to do this. So thank you very much.
Let's end today's episode with another Did You Know segment, when Carla and I share little-known facts about the U.S. Postal Service. I'll kick things off. Carla, did you know that certain U.S. zip codes can't be reached by land without first going through Canada?
I can only assume these places are in Alaska.
Well, you know what they say about assuming. Actually, one is in Minnesota and the other is in Washington State. In Minnesota, the area is called the Northwest Angle and is home to the northernmost post office in the contiguous U.S. At the end of the Revolutionary War, the Founding Fathers consulted an erroneous map for border negotiations with the British, resulting in a small part of the U.S., including Angle Inlet, Minnesota, ending up in what you think would be Canada.
So, does this mean the U.S. Postal Service operates in Canada?
Well, not exactly. Mail for Angle Inlet comes through Grand Forks, North Dakota, and then stops in War Road, Minnesota. A contractor then crosses the border to transport the mail to Angle Inlet and a place called Oak Island. Residents of Angle Inlet pick up their mail at the post office, where roughly 100 people have P.O. boxes.
That sounds complicated. We definitely have it easy. How about the zip code in Washington?
That's Point Roberts, Washington. It sits at the end of the Tawasin Peninsula, where the only land access is through British Columbia, Canada. Entry to Point Roberts requires 2 international border crossings.
That makes me appreciate my commute just a little bit more. And now for my Did You Know? We're heading even farther north, past Canada to the North Pole. Jonathan, did you know that the North Pole had its own postmark?
Really? How much mail is even going through the North Pole?
It's more for commemorative purposes. On August 3rd, 1958, the world's first nuclear submarine, the USS Nautilus, became the first submarine to reach the North Pole as it passed under the polar ice cap. Crew members Frank Holland and John Krawcheck decided to commemorate the trip with a special postmark and envelope cachet stamp. Crew members helped cancel 1,528 envelopes with Holland and Krawcheck's handmade devices. The cachet was added on the trip up, and the date stamp was applied while the sub was 700 feet below the surface.
Wow. Did the mail ever make it to its final destination?
Why, yes. After the Nautilus emerged on August 5th, the ship's commander was flown to a press conference in Washington, D.C., where he presented the specially canceled mail. Even though the mail was canceled by a ship crew and not by postal workers, the envelopes were successfully mailed to their destinations. And that wraps up this episode of Did You Know?
Carla, what a great conversation we had today with Justin. For me, it's the sheer size and scope of this vehicle modernization effort. I mean, we're talking about adding 106,000 new vehicles, more than half of which will be battery electric, by the way, to the largest fleet in the federal government. This is truly a monumental undertaking of historic proportions.
I think, yes, Justin was very enthusiastic about this effort, and just to hear that we are replacing vehicles that have been here for upwards of nearly 40 years is definitely a vast undertaking. So kudos to him and his team, the DFA, for bringing this to a reality. As I mentioned, this was such a large effort and something we've been talking about just for years, and to see it happening now is such a great thing. And that's all for this episode of Mailin It. Don't forget to subscribe to Mailin It wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss the next episode, and follow along on Instagram at U.S. Postal Service, X, formerly known as Twitter, at USPS, and on Facebook.